they're not, going to let their kids get hurt.
What's happening? We're continuing this ruthless compassion conversation with neurosurgeon. So WE says, great little detour, Jim, to take a minute and talk about the research, if you would, on compassion. Wow. Well, that was it. Good. That was a transition. It's a great segue. Can I stop crying? Actually, for some of you who may be interested, there was just a book published called from Oxford University Presses, which is probably one of the most prestigious academic presses. And it's an academic book that I'm a senior editor. Don and actually two of my colleagues who work with me are also co-editors. And it's called the Handbook of Compassion, Science. And this is almost 600-page text. Compassion Science, and that talks about the latest cutting edge research. And I have to tell you something. When I came up with this idea of studying compassion, and it's 10 years ago actually, next year, I had people say, why would you ever do that? That is an academic dead end. No. And in fact, when I had left Stanford for a period of time and I had come back, I went to a variety of scientists in psychology and neuroscience. And I said, I'd like to work with you to explore this area. And without exception, every one of them said, why would I do that? And now the great thing about scientists is that they are motivated by a few things. And if you pay for research, they're highly motivated. So actually, we began these different research experiments that I funded, and we found some extraordinary results. And two of these people who I initially engaged changed their focus of their research to focus actually on compassion. And the thing is that we don't appreciate as a species to theory of mind or to have abstract thinking, to have complex language, which result in this huge development of our cortex. It required our species, unlike other species, which swam away after they're born or run to the forest. We have an absolute requirement that our species is cared for. 10, 12, 15 years in my case, 37 years. But our children learn from us. But the extraordinary thing about that is that we have several attributes that have allowed us to survive. It is the ability to read emotional states in a microsecond. How many of you have loved ones or partners? They walk into a room. They don't need to see anything, You don't need to see anything to know exactly what's going on with them. Anything, you know exactly what's going on with them. Right? That is connection. And it's something we all have, but we are hardwired, because why would a mother care for a child for 10, 12, 15 years? Because the resource cost, the energy cost, huge, huge, huge. And it's because we are hardwired to care. That is our default state. That is how we function. That is how our physiology works at its best. When a mother or an individual cares for another person, they have the release of hormones and or neurotransmitters that result in a feeling of pleasure, a feeling of reward, a feeling of happiness. So we know that when an individual sees another individual do an act of kindness or caring, it spreads, ripples, and it motivates other people to care. We know that when you are in a situation, and how many people have been in a room, somebody walks in the room, they have a scowl on their face, their body language is aggressive, and all of you sit like this, right? Because you go into threat mode. When you were in threat mode, you cannot have access to your executive control function, which is discernment, thoughtful decision making. Because you're surviving, it shuts everything down. So you will survive. And you stopped listening. Yep. This is how people interact with people. Another person walks into a room and they sit there and they say, hello, how are you? You know, it's a beautiful day. Today I ran into so and so, and it was so nice to see them. And it's so wonderful to be with you today. And I really feel that I care for you. And does that change everything? You're suddenly relaxed. You're suddenly going, wow, this is pretty cool, because we are made to care. So when you act with intention, with compassion, your blood pressure decreases, your peripheral vascular function is improved, your blood pressure decreases, your heart rate becomes more variable, which is a good thing. It is associated with a decrease in heart attacks or sudden cardiac death. Your stress hormones are decreased. Your inflammatory proteins that are released are decreased. And inflammatory proteins are associated with a lot of disease states. And in fact, your telomeres lengthen. So there is every benefit every day where you were rewarded when you care for the other. And this is the other problem, though, is a part of our evolution. And there are good things and there are bad things, right? We have an excessive stress mode now because we're thus it have the same DNA as we had 200,000 years ago. Nothing's changed, but we have a very modern society that makes a lot of demands of our time, and it creates a lot of stress for you, for individuals. The other thing that happens is until 6 to 8,000 years ago, we live in groups of 10 to 50. We lived in tribes, so we have a tendency to identify with people who look like us, act like us, think like us. And while on the, in a harsh environment that worked really well, and you could identify when another tribe was suffering and intervene in modern society, it's horrible. And we have a tendency to look at the other as the other. Yet we only transcend when we look at the other as us. So we are running out of time, but that's okay. Order, talk to me about integrity. Director says, well, it's really, again, I always had to tell people I don't say nice things, which means, by which I mean, you can trust what I say. I'm going to be straight with you. And in the beginning of the work that my colleagues and I were developing, integrity became a really fundamental expression of having gotten past the way you wound up being, that's to say, you could be counted on for your word. And so that was around for a very long time. Then I met an extraordinary economist, academic economists by name, academic economist by the name of Michael Jensen. And Mike is, I think, at least he was at the time the most referenced economist in the whole community. That makes a really, really bright guy. But he had a transformational experience, and he became interested in making that more available. But then he got really fascinated with this integrity stuff, and what fascinated him was, sorry, I'm going to use economic language here for a second. I'll try to explain it. He said that the way in which we treated integrity made it a positive phenomenon. Now, positive for most of us sounds like something good, except for an economist, it's not something good. It's simply the way it is. The way it is. So integrity for most people is a good idea, something you ought to have, something it's good to have, something that's nice, that nice people had, and not nice people don't have. But as Mike and I have been working on this aisle, I think 10 years, the last paper we wrote on integrity and putting integrity into finance. Wow, that would be nice. And I have to tell you, it was accepted by a pretty prestigious journal called Capitalism in Society. The editor, which is a Nobel laureate in economics, so we're starting to make a few little inroads in, hey, let me tell you what putting integrity, how integrity is a positive phenomenon, is a description of the way things work. So I'll do this really fast. Integrity is defined as the state of being whole, complete, unbroken, sound, in perfect condition, never mind the rest of it. And so something is either in that state, or it isn't. An object is either whole, complete, unbroken, sound, in perfect condition, or it isn't. A system, likewise, and a person, as for a person, as a person. Now, I'm a person as a body, and you know my body's either whole, complete, unbroken, sound, in perfect condition, or it isn't. And if it isn't, there are consequences. What the consequence of being less than, now used short phrase, whole and complete, is a diminution. 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 Diminution of lowering or workability. Things don't work well when they lack integrity. That is to say, when they're less than whole and complete. Pretty obvious. Whole and complete is all you need for workability, and workability is either an opening or a limit for performance. It's not the whole story about performance. You need something in addition to workability. But as workability goes down, the opportunity for performance goes down. And that's integrity as a positive phenomenon, as just the way things work. So people who allow their integrity to diminish wind up with a lessened opportunity for performance. Doesn't mean they don't perform, because you can get a bicycle with a missing spoke to perform really well if you've got a champion bicycle rider on it. But as you reduce whole and complete, you reduce workability. As a reduced workability, you reduce the opportunity for performance. And so that's in 2 seconds. Mike and I are in the process. Mike and I are in the process of writing the final thing we're ever gonna write on integrity for Cambridge University Press, about the story about integrity as a positive phenomenon. Okay, that's my old story. Let me ask you a question. When you look over this extraordinary life and career and the things that you've done, I want to reference this back to the Hunger Project, actually. What is the centrality of what you have been trying, the gift you have been giving people? Well, here's what happened. It was very clear. Early after doing the training for, I don't know, a year or whatever the heck it was, I was now observing people who had been through that transformational experience. And they were different. They wanted to make a difference. I watched people make big sacrifices when they were confronted by an opportunity to make a difference. They would take it on even at a fairly significant sacrifice. And I watched kids from who in those days we called them youth at risk. Yeah, I watch youth at risk go through this transformational experience, and all of a sudden they were the leaders in their community. Watch guys in prison do the same thing. At any rate, I became convinced by observation that people who have achieved a certain freedom to be and freedom to act, people who were at least significantly free of the limitations that they had built up, in what was going on with them internally, wanted to make a difference. And that's how the Hunger Project got born. I looked for where could the people that I knew, the people that I had worked with, the people that I watched do extraordinary things for themselves, I wanted to find a place where they, and I could participate in making a difference. And those days, hunger was inevitable. I mean, it just couldn't, it was inevitable. And we committed ourselves to getting hunger to the end of hunger, to be an idea whose time has come. People are fed. And I don't know, something like 5 million people participated in making that happen. And the reason I bring that up is that each of us has the ability, again, to connect and to make something happen. And never underestimate this power within you to do this. And Jim said, it's just an extraordinary example of that. But each of us has that. What I'd like to do now is open the mics for questions. So you just come up to the mic here, and you can form a line, and we'll go do some questions and answers, and we'll see what we might learn from all of you. All of that. Yes, there are no questions on this side. These are the knowers. Yeah, I used to work for you many years ago in New York. Laura Owen. There used to be Maxwell. Yes, great to see you and Dr. Doty. I read your book. It's great now that I've kissed ass here. None done a hell of a job. I'm good to go now. You're talking about caring is in our DNA. And I look at what's going on in the world, and I'll just take one thing. Okay, there's so many things we could talk about, but let's just say refugees, millions of refugees. What's going on with our DNA that's being okay, what is the dysfunction going on there? Second. Heavily integrated concepts of Maxwell's malts, a self-help book, Psycho-Cybernetics. Maxwell malts. Something to look up. Huh. Okay, Jim, if that's not okay. It's not okay, of course. The problem is that when you create fear, it results in people doing things that are not fundamentally natural to them, because they go into their stress mode, and they don't become more open. They become less open. If you look into our own political, you see a fear narrative and a group of people who are terrified and who then create the other. And in an artificial, a narrative that there's not enough, or something's being taken from me, or somebody's taking advantage, then you objectify the other and you justify doing horrible things. And we see it over and over again. You know, the one thing that I know for sure is that if I act how I wish others to act, I can control that. And that is the only thing I know for sure. And the other, I mean, no, okay, we'll continue. Hope you have a great day. Peace and love. Bye-bye. See ya.